Welcome to the Morning Formation. This episode is powered by Act Now Education. Warriors fall in. It's time for formation. So this is part 2, talking to Mike Keevil. Mike, the first half of this conversation, we talked about your time in the Marines, the environments you operated in, and some of the real experiences from mortuary affairs to joining Marine Recon. Now I want to shift into what all that actually meant. And because there's a lot of people listening right now, whether they served or not, who are trying to figure out how to deal with pressure, identity, and making better decisions in their own lives. So let's go there. Let's talk about it. After everything you went through, I believe we finished off, you were just getting back from Afghanistan. Talk to me about what happened when you came back.
Yeah, so overall, now I turned 41 tomorrow. Actually, wait, what time is it? Oh, in an hour, I turned 41.
Happy birthday.
It took me a solid decade to fully process and get on the path to heal. I'm gonna go backwards a little bit because this was a pretty wild thing that happened. So back when I was on my second deployment, I was stationed in Little Creek, Virginia, and I was taking a flight home out of Norfolk, and I'm sitting next to this guy, and we just start shooting the breeze. And he was a former Navy SEAL, and I, tell him a little bit of, wave tops of my experiences, and he goes, "Hey man, like, how are your dreams?" And I was like, my dreams are gory, but they, I was like, it's kind of just whatever. And he goes, "Hey, be careful in your 30s." And I was maybe 22 or 23 at the time. And like all 20 somethings are just like, whatever, old dude. So I didn't really heed his advice. And I tell you what, it definitely came crashing in around my 30s. So what it was like when I came back, I didn't realize how high strung I was. There were a couple close friends who would pull me aside and be like, "Dude, are you good?" I'm like, "Yeah, what are you talking about?" Like in my head, I'm like, "Hey, I'm doing my job. I'm doing the things." But they're like, "Dude, you're like really high strung." And, the examples I talked about in the last episode, I mean, that was one mission, man. Um, my battalion, we were in sustained, like all 6 platoons were in sustained engagements, for over 100 days, 240 engagements, 47 urgent surgicals. I mean, it was wild. Um, and so, I did what most men do, and I just go back to work. And then in and around that time, we met. But I think this is a pretty important thing to bring up, was going to that location. And before that, I told them where I was going, and everyone's like, "Oh, dude, you're gonna work with JJ Rakaza," and I was like, like never heard of her, and they're like, "Dude, he's like the number 2 pistol shooter in the world," and I was like, "Yeah, I don't care, dude." And um, at my previous site, there was a guy, and he tried getting me into competitive shooting, and I have the confidence to tell this story right now. I started a training journal, and I wrote one paragraph on the first page, and I still have it. I didn't burn it, and I'll share it with you. So in the journal, I wrote that I was like, "Hey, this is going to be my training journal," and I wrote in there, "Hey, like this guy wants me to get into competitive pistol shooting, but I'm afraid that it will affect me tactically." And I wrote that, and then it must have gone in a drawer or something. I didn't see it again for years, and I pulled it out later. Dude, I wanted to burn it. And I didn't. I kept it. Um so I I meet JJ, and I see him shoot. And earlier in the last episode, I talked about when I saw a crazy kid and I was like envious of him as like what he is, right? So, now I'm 30, 31. And when I saw him shoot, I didn't want to be him. I wanted to know how he got there. Because it was nothing like I've ever seen before, and it wasn't the score that he got. It was how he did it, and I was just intrigued. I was intrigued by it, and I bring that up because looking back, that was that time in my life right there, and I tell this story because that was the last time I let my ego control me in terms of like throwing a zing out to a dude I've never met before, and judging someone honestly. Like when I look back on myself now, I like I said, I wanted to burn the pages in this book, that version of myself. So anyway, we became great friends, and he I didn't know, but he was kind of like doing like a Mr. Miyagi thing on me. Like I wanted to get better at shooting. I felt like I had plateaued, but I didn't know what the next level was, and it was competitive pistol shooting. So in the background, he was spending a ton of time. I mean, dude, if he calls me, I will answer every single time. If he ever needs anything, like he has been that impactful to me. And we spend hours and hours and hours on the range. And I'm just like learning all of these things that like no one had ever exposed me to. No one ever told me. It was the first time I ever read a book about shooting, and I'd been teaching people all over the world. I thought I was a good shooter, and it was a hard reality check that I actually didn't know shit. What I was doing was I was just regurgitating what I'd heard before, and I didn't really know how to articulate what is actually happening shooting a pistol. Um, and so we're spending all this time on the range, and then I get introduced to USPSA, United States Practical Pistol Shooting Association, and I fell in love with it, dude. I had the same adrenaline drop on the first stage of the match, the same drop I would have in my body before like walking onto a helicopter, like before mission. And it was the first time I had that sensation where it was like in a controlled environment. I've had the other sensation before, but like I'd almost be in a car accident or something, where you get that adrenaline drop. Obviously, I'm not trying to replicate car accidents. But I'm getting this every Sunday. And then with that, it wasn't just learning how to actually shoot, but it completely changed my entire understanding of how to train people to shoot, and through my own journey. Um, and then I got heavy into the competition circuit, and I fell in love with hand loading my own ammunition. So I get in from work and I crank out, 100, 200 rounds. And that was the beginning of me becoming centered. It didn't get me over the finish line, but it was the beginning of it, was hand loading ammunition. Yeah. So on my off time, alcohol became like a major factor. And but when I got into hand loading my own ammunition, um, I can't I can't be drinking as I'm building my own bullets, because I don't want the round to explode in my hands. I don't want to mess up my hands. I don't want to blow up my, $3,000 gun. So
Is that a delicate process, by the way?
I don't want to say it's a delicate process, but there is a, I'll tell you this story. I had a buddy, mutual friend of ours, and he was hand loading ammunition for me. And I go to this major match in South Chester, Southern Chester, Maryland. And before you go to a match, you'll shoot the ammunition that you shoot. You need to shoot it through a chronographer, and that gives you the velocity, right? And there's a calculation for the bullet weight, and the velocity equals your division, right? So you need to check all your stuff before you go to the matches. At every stage, at every major match, random range officer RO will walk around and be like, hey, give me bullets from that magazine. You unload them, and then there is a chronographer stage where you shoot your bullet, they weigh your bullets, and then it is supposed to be within certain parameters. So anyway, I do all the pre-fire stuff. I had a chronographer, everything's good to go. And I go down the Southern Chester, and there was a massive temperature shift. And I remember sitting in my car because I showed up early, and it was like cold out. And the lubrication I used on my guns was grease. Slide Glide by Brian Enos. He's actually the author of the book that I was talking about, practical beyond fundamentals, practical pistol shooting. Amazing book. And it was published in 1991, right?
Oh,
And
wow.
no one had told me about this book until like 2016. So anyway, I'm sitting in my car, and just this thought came into my head of, dude, temperature shift, uh this grease is not good. So I unloaded my competition gun, not unloaded, took it apart,
Mhm.
totally took off all the grease. I put regular CLP on, and then it ran great. There was another guy there shooting in the same division as me, and he had the Slide Glide on, and his gun
Mhm.
totally jammed up. Anyway, so I go to the chrono stage, and I failed. And what I didn't understand was the barometric temperature shift, the barometric pressure and the temperature shift affected the velocity. And what happens when you fail chrono is you go into the open division, which the open division is essentially like no rules. That's when you see like the super crazy guns where it's like a giant optic on there, a compensator. They call it a gas pedal. It's like a place to like put your
Mhm.
thumbs. Giant magazine well. It that is the fastest version of the sport. And I was shooting single stack division, which is 1911, 8 rounds plus one, iron sights. That is arguably, after revolver, that's like the hardest, uh, um, the hardest automatic pistol kind of division. So I fail. And after that, I bought all my own. I wasn't mad at the dude who hand loaded my ammunition, but I bought all the stuff for myself, and my checks like went through the roof of like my making sure every round is correct. I would check every 10 rounds, which is excessive, but I tell you what, after that, never had an issue with ammunition ever. I never wanted to lose because of something that I could have prevented on the front end. And that has everything to do with weapons maintenance. I had a logbook of how often I'd change my springs out. I had like strict kind of rules that I would follow match to match, which interestingly was beyond what I did in combat, which was that in itself is mind blowing. Why am I spending more time preparing to shoot a game on a Sunday than I did over in Afghanistan? Which that completely changed how I trained my guys in my last deployment. So
Yeah, it's pretty wild, man, to think about your transition from combat, coming back here, and then getting into competitive pistol shooting. At what point do you feel like things started to shift for you personally? Like, when did you start feeling sort of the change to the next chapter, to the next version of Mike?
it wasn't for a while. So, when I retired from Marine Corps, I realized how much time I got back in my job field, even in the reserves. I mean, my part-time job was essentially my full-time job. Um, I was just spending an insane amount of time being a platoon sergeant and doing all the things to make sure when we show up to train, like everything's good to go, and then execute the training. So I um I spent a lot of time away from my family. Interestingly, for all three of my sons, I started a workup either as they were being born or within weeks of all three of them being born. So I don't know what the first year of having a kid is like. I left when they're just like laying there, and
Right.
they're all, bundled, and then I come home and they're walking. Um so anyway, I always like to be semi in control of like what my situation is. So my first deployment, and when I was younger, early 20s, everything was like, hey, what's this next opportunity? Yep, roger that. I'm gonna go do that. And then as I got a little bit older, I wanted to make sure that I had a little bit, I called it, I'm in control of my own shit show. Like, I know I have to go, but I wanted a little bit more control of who I was going with, and not necessarily where we were going, but who I was going with. So, um, I volunteered to take a platoon to Southeast Asia, and this was the first time my battalion was assigned this mission. And usually, when you're the first to go, it can go one of two ways. It's just like a total catastrophe, or you understand that it's going to be chaotic and there's a lot of unknowns. But hey, I'm going in with the guys that I want to go with, and we're just going to figure it out. And so I volunteered for my last deployment, and that whole process was about 17 months. My youngest son, he's turning 9 on the 22nd. His, you know, he was born the day after me, and so I I put these guys through like a pretty intense workup, and in my head, I was training them to be prepared for Sangin. Um, and one of the critiques was I built a mid 2000s platoon in 2017 and 2018, which didn't really get highlighted until we were interacting with our active. Our active duty sister platoons, when I mean we were definitely more violent than the other platoons. We were definitely more intense. But like during all the shooting packages, I brought everything I learned from competitive shooting into these new packages. And throughout my time, even before the deployment, I was getting guys into USPSA, and I mean these guys were phenomenal. Couldn't have asked for anything better. And but I told my platoon commander when we first got linked up, I was like, hey, look, like this workup is going to be intense, and I mean ultimately we need to totally like break them down, and we're going to build them up like piece by piece. So we go through that workup, and that was when the drinking really kind of turned on that deployment. And at the same
And this was
time,
and this was right around your 30s, right?
I was 35.
So going back to what the Navy SEAL told you, this is kind
Yeah.
of right.
Yeah. I mean, there were things that were happening in the background that I didn't understand until a little bit later. probably like 38, 39 was when I kind of had like my big, kind of fall, so to speak. But these things are like happening in the background. And, so I'm, I'm, I'm working insane hours. I made sure that I was the first one to wake up and I was the last one to go to bed. And I would make sure that the guys would see me. And, so we do that workup, and we go to Okinawa. We check into 3rd Recon Battalion again, which it was nice coming back, because everyone from my 2011 deployment, it was pretty, there was a lot of bad blood between the 0321s, like the guys in the platoons, and then our entire leadership chain. If if you check out the book, A Few Bad Men by Fred Galvin, he was the company commander for Task Force Violence. It was the first official MARSOC company that got deployed. And they were the guys that were accused of, murder and all this like crazy stuff. And those guys got dragged through the mud, I mean, for like years. And ultimately, like it was all bullshit. Which is like, it's just sad to hear. But anyway, Fred was my battalion operations chief. And the last chapter in the book, he talks about our time in the Sangha Valley. Anyway, so going back to that battalion was a little, I mean, it was definitely emotional for me. I think it was something to the effect of like, over 80% of all the guys who could get out of the Marine Corps got out of the Marine Corps, 2012, 2013. And that, it took a couple years for 3rd Recon and the Recon community in general to kind of rebuild its numbers, because of, the toxic, mismanaged leadership. I talked about in the last episode, like, yeah, it was like pretty cool story to hear, but the underlying tones was like, we were denied air support, we were denied any sort of support, and we're being sent in to go clear this compound cluster, like compound by compound with 30 guys. Like it was ridiculous, and so anyway, I tried stepping back into that unit, like with a more positive outlook. And, I mean, overall the experience was great. Professionally, it was one of the highlights of my career. Now financially, going from my regular job, back to being a 14-year staff sergeant. I mean, dude, it was like 30 grand less. And that really hurt my family and our like financial situation. And like I said, it was also just like the time. So total time for me was about 17 months. And that was in and around Jaron was born in April, and then I went to breacher school shortly afterwards. And then I went straight to the staff and CO course, and then I went straight into the workup. And then I had about 10 days leave before we went overseas, and then, go to Okinawa for 8 months. When I came back from that, I had about a month off, but I was still in Atlanta, so I wasn't with my family. And then I went to dive school for 2 months. So, I mean, that was like a really, really long time. But anyway, so we're on island, and I, dude, there were things that were just building up that I didn't really understand at the time. And I would, the team leaders would be like, "Hey, Mike, like, let's go out. What do you want to do?" I'm like, "Dude, I need like a jammy day." And like, they look at me and they're like, "Yo, what the fuck do you mean like a jammy day?" And I'm like, "Dude, I'm just going to play video games, and I'm going to drink, and I'm just going to like shut the world out." And, this one day, I hear this like pounding on my door. I open it up. It's my team leaders. And it was probably 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm in my pajamas, and I was, pretty intoxicated. And they're like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Dude, I'm doing my jammy day." And they're like, "You weren't kidding?" I was like, "Nope." And they're like, "Well, why don't you come out with us to Recon Island?" And it was this island about 300 meters or so off the main island, and guys would swim out there, just hang out on the beach, go spearfishing, whatever. And I was like, all right, whatever, I'll go with them. Anyway, I bring that up because later on during my time there, I had this like thought just come into my head that was it was like this. It was like, hey, I'm ready to go home, ready to go home. And the thing that I didn't realize was like, I emotionally wanted to go home, but I didn't know how to go home. Of course, like there were still several months left. I still had a job to do. I still had dudes to take care of. So like that was still like hyper mission focused on like doing all of that. But I was just tired of being away. And so I get home and I immediately realized like something was off, like with my wife. Um, and you know, ultimately that deployment, and she did 3 deployments with me, and in addition to our other job, which you're gone a lot, and I mean, that deployment broke her. And when I you know we've been divorced for a couple years now. I mean, we have a great relationship. It's mutual. It's cordial. But like, I didn't understand like what was going on her end, where even in training was, we're jumping, we're shooting, we're, breaching, we're, doing crazy stuff. And she's like, dude, it was a lot, I was just waiting for the phone call where you're seriously hurt, or you got killed like doing a thing. And that was never really a thought in my head while I was doing my thing. Interestingly, like we had almost parallel lives, where she was a survival mechanism for me while I was away, and I was kind of like you know a version of a survival mechanism for her, like, but while we were apart. And in retrospect, I think like we had false expectations of how the other was, because we had such strong coping mechanisms while we were apart. Um, so anyway, I get back from that and things are just kind of not good. And, but I'm like, I'm ready to be home, but like, what does that mean? Um, Overall, like that deployment was harder than my Sangin deployment. Not in terms of like people getting hurt or dying and
Right.
stuff like that. It was harder because I pushed those guys so hard um for like the Super Bowl that just never happened. It's like the the combat portion was easy in retrospect, because it would be sometimes suddenly, sometimes it would be like a crescendo buildup, right? Like I have this on a video I sent back to my wife at the time, where sunrise just happened. We're already out on patrol, and I'm just kind of videoing like what we're doing. And I would send back CDs of like these little like videos, like, hey, what's up? Hey guys,
Mhm.
say hi to Krista. And there's this one where sunrise just happened, and then you just hear the machine guns going off, and I was like, well, I guess it's starting. Like, love you, babe, bye. And like, in retrospect, can you imagine like
Right.
getting that from your loved one? You're just like, oh
Right.
wow, like I got a CD, video, and we're just like all walking around, like everything's cool, and then just like, dude, like war starts kicking off. So like slow crescendo build up to that, to where like, okay, now we got to move, we got to go support this other platoon, X, Y, and Z, right? Whereas like this deployment, non-kinetic, and it just ended, right? Um, and like I said, the training that I put on for these guys was to survive a Sangin style deployment.
Right.
So that was when uh it was kind of in my face now, like a kind of like conflicting ideas. It's like, okay, I want to be home, but like I don't really know how to be home. And then my son's godfather, who I'm his daughter's godfather. He's my best friend. He was my JTAG. I talked about him in the last episode. He became the president of he wasn't the president yet. He eventually became the president, but he worked for a veteran nonprofit called Recon Sniper Foundation. And he calls me one day and he goes, "Hey, how's the competitive pistol shooting been for you?" I was like, "Dude, it's been great, man. It's like it's kind of refocused me in a lot of ways. It's given me something constructive to do. I'm drinking less, so it's all good." And he's like, "What do you think about starting a team?" And I was like, "Okay, yeah, that sounds good." And so I was the plank owner for the captain of Team Recon Sniper Foundation. But interestingly, I found out that like not a lot of snipers and recon dudes wanted to get into shooting after they you know retired, got out of the military or whatever. Because we started with pistol and precision rifle,
Mm.
which to me made sense. But talking to these guys, they would start getting into other things, right? So by the time I left, and I did that for about 3 years, sponsoring guys to go shoot, and we got custom jerseys. They had to have a jersey of a fallen recon dude or sniper on their back, and building communities. And by the time I left, I mean, there was rodeo, skydiving, MMA, Ironman. Like if a dude was into a thing and it was competitive, then we would sponsor him, the best that we could to go help him, do the things. And while that was like very fulfilling, kind of two things were happening at the same time. One, like I said, and I had the thought of like, hey, I want to be home with my family, but like I wasn't home with my family. So like I that was the first time in my life I realized I was definitely like a workaholic, and I was using work and stacking work on top of work on top of work to cope with everything that happened before, back to what that SEAL said, like be careful in your 30s. So like there's kind of a bunch of things like kind of all like
Yeah.
building up to this one year of my life. And so I'm doing that. And the other part was I started to hate veterans. And if you've never worked nonprofit, then you could never understand. But like it got to the point where every single day I'm, on a conference call, every day, every other day, some conference call and something catastrophic is happening and someone is going nuclear. Um, Everything from like their wife just uh cut the rope because she walked in and saw he was trying to hang himself, to the DUIs, and then running from the cops and just ending up in jail and then going to rehab, and then just it was a lot, man. And I hadn't fully processed like everything that I went through.
Right.
So I ended up resigning, and that was hard. My friend, he thought it was because of him. Later on, we worked it out, but it wasn't because of him. I needed to work on my own stuff. So in and around that time, I'm working on the West Coast at a CQB school for Marine Recon, and dude, that was an amazing time in my life too. There was a kid I met there, Gabriel. He's about 10 years younger than me. And this is something that I talked about in the book, which we'll get into later on, where I think it's so important to have you got to really choose who you surround yourself with. And
Yes.
it should not be all the same type of person or the same age person either, right? Um, I think you need to find mentors probably about 10 minimum 10 years older than you, and you need to find, of course you need to have your peer group, right? And then you need to have dudes that are younger than you about 10 years, and you are giving back and you are mentoring them. um so Gabe was one of these guys, and I met him at the Recon Challenge in 2016, before my last deployment. And the Recon Challenge is it's about 25 to 30 mile race. You have 55-pound rucks on, no water, well, not no water, but before water, and then you carry one of the orange markers you use to mark an LZ. Total brain fart when that's called. Anyway, but on the flag it'll be a fallen recon Marine. Actually, the first year I ran it, it was for Stephen Bixler. I talked about his story in the last episode. And then the second time I ran it, it was for Danny Gurr. He was one of the Recondos that was killed in Sangin on that deployment. But anyway, it's like this crazy, like I said, 25 to 30 mile race, and you're doing all sorts of crazy things. You're jumping out of helicopters into the ocean. You got to swim with your rucks, and then you're, making the foot movements. And then there'll be like different stations along the way. You got to do like load a radio and then make the call. You need to shoot guns. The first year you had to change, you'll appreciate this. You had to change a Humvee tire. Which, dude, why are there so many bolts on a Humvee? It's something. I was at Motor T, like, I was just like, dude, what's so many bolts? And rappel down, the side of a mountain. And anyway, so we're on the obstacle course, and I see these two younger Recondos behind us, and one of the objectives at the end of the obstacle course was your ruck had to touch the top bar of this rope climb. So my partner Trey, he actually took over my platoon for me. Phenomenal kid. I've known him since he was 19, and but he was an engineer, and so we're like looking at the obstacle, and he's like, "Hey, we can just like tie some 550 cord around the ruck, and then at this angle we can do that." And I was like, "Okay, nerd, just tell me what we're gonna do." And so we like tie 550 cord around this Nalgene, throw it over the top bar, and this is probably, I don't know, 30 feet or something, and throw it over, and then we pulled it at this angle. Our ruck just touched, brought it back down, and then we were on our way. Well, these other Recondos, they were trying to make up time, and Gabe, I saw him, he just climbed the rope with the ruck on, and his partner climbed the rope next to him. And then I see his partner grab like the ruck frame, because we run Alice packs, and grab the frame and just like Hoyoken like punch the ruck and touch the top bar. And I just remember just thinking, I was like, fucking young Recondos, piss and vinegar. They're just gonna get the job done. Doesn't matter if it's the smart way, the hard way. I'm just gonna get it done. Anyway, so we ended up talking at the dinner that night, and then when I was going out to Okinawa, I knew he was there, so I hit him up. So we became really tight. Weirdly enough, when he rotated back stateside, he was an instructor at that facility, and so we interacted with each other. I mean, for the next 3 or 4 years, I'd go out to his facility for a month, he'd come to my facility for a month. We were working together all the time. But long story longer, what am I doing? I'm just away again, and I'm just not home. So that was kind of like almost like the right near the boiling point before like I broke, in
The
around that.
culmination. I, throughout this whole conversation, Mike, I just want to ask you a question, man. You were so caffeinated and highly driven and hell-bent on just performing and achieving something. Did you or were you running from something or running to something?
So it was twofold. One of them One of them was my father, for sure. And I kind of talked about that a little bit in the previous episode, but I um I was chasing approval, and I didn't understand that for a long time. We are just now kind of rebuilding our relationship, but for and I've learned to accept, who he is, and I have learned to forgive, and he did the best that he could with the tools that he had. In the pre-show we were talking about Landman, which you need to watch. But season 2, dude, I cried twice. And it was about like sons and their fathers, and then, from, a father who thinks he's kind of messing everything up, and then, his son is like, "Hey man, like, I think you're doing a pretty good job." Uh and that kind of broke my heart a little bit, because that was kind of the thing that I was chasing, like, from my father. Like, what do I need to do to get like a, "Hey, good job, man," or, "Hey, good, proud of you," like, "Love you, dude," or, something like that. So that was the thing that was going on, like, in the deepest parts of my head, which, oddly enough, I didn't that didn't really come to the surface until I went to therapy. Um, and if I know a ton of guys are hesitant to do that, but I think it was a good thing for me.
Hmm.
And so I thought I was going into therapy for something else, and then ultimately, like, we were talking about, like, that complex, and that was a thing that I had completely compartmentalized, like, to the lowest depths of my head, and now it's kind of like blowing up in my face. So that was the first thing. The second thing was just the reservist, like, stigma, where I was another reason I was so brutal to those guys on that deployment, was because I was trying to prove a point. Because if you've never been a reservist, you show up, to work with the active component, and, like, there's just this shitty stigma. And I've learned to accept and laugh about it over the years, but I pushed them so hard to be better, because I wanted to show up, and I wanted to be better shooters, better planners, better patrollers, better assaulters, better everything. And now I'm working at this active duty facility, and I'm training 1st Recon Battalion. 1st Recon Battalion and 1st Force Recon in the Marine Corps, like, those are the golden children of recon in the Marine Corps. I don't care what anyone says. And now I'm training these guys, and I remember I had this, like, weird thought. I'm standing there on the range, and I'm with Gabe, and I was like, kind of just staring. He's like, "Yo, what's up, dude?" I'm like, "I can't believe I push my guys that hard." He's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "For years, I, would push these guys to the edge of breaking, and then some of them broke, and I lost some relationships along the way. And but those who stayed the course, and those who were with me, they were incredible reconnaissance Marines. And I'm looking around at these guys, and I'm like, I wouldn't even have let these guys come onto the range." He's like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "Just the way their gear is, everything, the you know how they were when they showed up." I was like, I would have just been crushing them in the tree line, just doing 321 8 count bodybuilders, because our MOS is 0321. So anytime you make a mistake, you owe 321 8 counts of something. Actually, my mentor Russ, I got in trouble in Afghanistan for something dumb, and we get back from, like, a 5-day mission, and I forget what it was, but he's like, "Hey, you owe me 321 before chow." And I was like, "Roger that." And I just go out in the back of the tent, and I do my 321 8 counts, like, on my own in silence, and then, go to chow. So anyway, um, it was just, like, completely unrealistic to a point with how I was behaving. And so those were kind of the two things. It was like the reservist stigma, and then it was just not being good enough to, like, prove myself to my dad.
Yeah. I understand that drive for sure. There's a lot of commonality between my childhood and my drive to join the military during a time of war when most people were not raising their hand to volunteer to be a part of that. And I also wanted to ask you too. You missed out on the first part of your your boys' lives, basically the first year of their lives.
Hmm.
Similar to me, my oldest missed the first 5 months of her life. Did you feel like there's a disconnect when you came back being a father to your boys? Was there a certain amount of time or something you had to do to try to find that natural connection because you missed out on that first year?
Um, not not really, and I think it's because I had boys.
Yeah.
I think that's a factor. Um, but also, my wife at the time was really good at, the FaceTiming, and,
Mm,
they had a pillow and a picture of
right.
me. Um, it's on, film, when I would get home, and they were a little weird at first, just like, "Who's this dude?"
Mm,
But I think back to what we talked about in the previous episode, where I've always been very, very tribal. Um, Interestingly, I talked about this in the last episode too, where I was the bottom third physically in recon school. I was always at the bottom of the pack. Sometimes I was dead last, which that kind of drove me to work on all the things that I was not good at after that. But something weird happened when we went to patrolling phase, and I'm seeing these guys. I mean, dude, there were guys doing 3-mile runs in under 18 minutes. I mean, studs, right? These guys are coming in from the ruck runs. I mean, they're just amazing. The swims, all the things. And but when we got to patrol phase, like something like weird happened. Like I almost had this like superpower where I excelled in terms of like endurance and just like grinding out the patrol. Cause I mean, recon patrol is brutal. I mean, your your rucks are 120, 130 pounds. You're going up mountains. It's very slow. When you when it I mean in planning, you will plan for the speed, and like, because the commander needs to know your timeline. And when you're briefing, hey, we're at during this part of the mission, we're going to be moving like 0.1 kilometers an hour. And it's important to bring that up because recon patrol, when you're long range, the only way to communicate is either SATCOM, satellite communications, or HF, high frequency. But for HF, you have to like set up this big ass antenna. Like it's not a quick process. And so everything is very, very slow, deliberate. You might be on patrol, recon patrol for, several days, and everything's this. Hey, what's up? Hey, what do you got for like, and it's almost like when you get back from the patrol is, you feel like alive again, but it's like, you have the insane, weight on your back, and you're moving, like I said, sometimes 0.1 kilometers an hour. If you're standing for more than 3 to 5 seconds, like you're taking a knee and you're holding a sector, and then everyone is standing up and taking a knee, like it's like this kind of like slow, grueling, orchestrated, like dance sort of. But I mean, it is grueling. But like I loved it, dude. There's some recon dudes who really hate that part of the job. They like the sexy shit, like the direct action raids and flying in on helicopters and the explosives and all that stuff. And I mean, that stuff is fun, but there is something about like moving, across this mountain range, and it's just you and five other guys, a 6-man recon team, just fucking out there, and being a sergeant recon team leader is the shit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so this like superpower, where like I know as a person inside, like I just work better in a group of people. I just do. And it took me a long time, probably up until not probably up until very recently, probably within the last year or two, after the divorce and everything, that I learned how to be grounded alone. And a lot of that was through faith. Um, but yeah, there was just something about me, and like I know how to motivate young men to do things they don't want to do, and that is quintessentially like being a father. Um, and yeah, so and as they got older, we definitely connect a lot better. But yeah, there was a large gaps,
yeah.
that I just wasn't around. And, I have to say, like, their mother was like awesome at, taking them to the games and doing the sports thing with them, and, and all that. So
Yeah. I'm sure there's certain things in her that you saw she possessed that you didn't have or you didn't have growing up. I know a lot of times people that come from checkered childhoods, when if they're aware, they try to find a partner that possesses a lot of whether it's a good family or they are very grounded, they try to partner and link up with someone that kind of fulfills those voids that they don't have. I know that's kind of how I was for me with my ex. Was I She had everything that I didn't have. She had a good family. She was grounded. She was very calm, very like just a good mother altogether. So, um, I didn't know if you had the same thing with your wife, but that's sort of the void that I had filled out because I wanted my kids to have, a really good mom. But
yeah, yeah, no, same, yeah.
so I wanted to ask you, man. We kind of glossed over it earlier, but you talked about delayed consequences. In combat, mistakes they show up immediately, but in life, sometimes they don't. And when did that realization hit you?
So when I came back from my last deployment, my ex-wife, she's one of 5 daughters, and it's like all chick cousins. It's all women. And there was one other boy, and then my sons. And as they got older, we would be at the family gathering or whatever. And this one time, it was around Christmas, and there was a game store down the street. And my son Jace goes, "Hey, well, let's go to the game store." I was like, "Hell yeah, dude! Like, let's get out of here." And,
Hmm.
so we get down the street to this game store, and I'd seen Warhammer 40K, the game growing up, and I played the video game, the real time strategy game, but I never played like the tabletop game. So if you don't know what Warhammer 40K is, it is 28 to 32 millimeter models that you build, paint, and then you assemble an army, and then you're essentially playing Risk like on steroids. And so we go to the store, he sees it, and he's like, "Hey, can we learn how to play the game?" So I talked to the owner, and he was like, "Yeah, his name is Brian." And he's like, "Yeah, come back tomorrow." So we show up the next day. There's some high schooler kid, and he shows us how to play the game. And I look at my son, I'm like, "Yo, what do you think?" He's like, "Dude, I love it." And I was like, "All right, cool. I guess we're like into this now." And me being dad, now I gotta. And he was like 9 at the time, and now I gotta learn how to play the game. And so I'm watching, YouTube. I'm like learning about this thing, and um I found like local game stores where we lived. So we started going to these game stores during the week, and integrating with these like new guys, completely different environment. And we're just playing the game, and what I found was like, dude, there's kind of 3 major parts to the hobby. There's the story, which there's over 500 books. So if you're into like really long, like they call it like space opera or like space horror, if you're into that, like the story's phenomenal. And then there's like the hobbying and crafting side, which is, painting the models and then painting your vehicles. And then there's the game. And then within the game, there's kind of like two branches. There's a narrative version, which you will essentially play stories from the books, which is pretty cool. And then there's like the pure competition side where you're building an army that is what is the most efficient and lethal army that you can build, and then you go play against other people. Well, there's like this entire like tournament circuit, and like I said, like I've always gravitated towards like finding new groups of dudes to do stuff with. And so no one from my game store wanted to play in the tournaments. So I go online, I research like where to go, how to sign up, like how to find these things. And I just start going by myself. I would drive, Saturday morning an hour to go to these tournaments. So instead of USPSA, now I'm like into this thing. And dude, I fell in love with it, man. Like I loved everything about it. And what I started to realize and this is my fifth year in the competitive tournament kind of circuit. What I realized throughout that whole experience was I was an isolationist. And I would have never said I was an isolationist before. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I have tons of friends. Like, we all, I talk to dudes all the time. Well, I was only associating myself with recon dudes and snipers. I had no friends locally. All my friends are across the country, across the world, whatever. But essentially, it's all the same type of dude. So we all went through generally the same training. We all had the same deployments. Everyone's getting divorced. Everyone's drinking a lot. Like everyone's kind of just like the same. And Warhammer was the first thing that really pulled me outside of my own circles. The competitive shooting did to a point. Like I said, like that was like the right direction, but that wasn't ultimately what I needed to really start healing and processing like everything that I've been through. So I remember this one tournament. I meet this dude named Derek, and he had these big ass fucking pajama pants on, he had a backwards hat. It actually said the same thing our hat says now, 40K Dirtbags. So he's like this, and it just said Dirtbags because that was the name of his baseball team when he was growing up. So um, we just connected like immediately. And for about a year, I would go to his house every Sunday, and we would play. And we were both like hyper focused on getting into the competitive scene. And I mean, Derek played baseball his whole life. Like he's a jock, loves to drink beer, just hang out and shoot the breeze. And like I said, like we would spend hours together, and we never talk about life really. Like the game is like that immersive. And we've only just within the past maybe 2 years started really, really getting to know each other in terms of like our other lives. Um, and so he started a channel called 40K Dirtbags, and it was about like tactics and battle reports. And I mean, Derek, like, dude, he's one of the best players in the world.
Hmm.
And in a weird way, like it was it was like another time in my life where I'm coming across like the best in the world, right? So I met JJ, one of the best shooters in the world. Derek, he's one of the best 40K players in the world. These skydiving courses that we go to are like some of the best skydivers in the world in their sport. And it was just odd that I would just kind of find myself in these circles. But every time I found myself in this new circle, I'm starting back at the bottom. And, earlier when I said that before I met JJ, that was the last time where I let like ego kind of drive my like framing of people or a sport or an event or a thing. By this point, like I'm like, hey man, like I'm not good at this game. And it took me a little bit to understand what the game is actually asking you to do. So, you mentioned delayed consequences, where
Hmm.
my life beforehand, everything was immediate action, immediate response. I see the target, I shoot the target. I see the objective, I hit the objective, and then what is the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. Whereas in Warhammer 40K, it's turn-based strategy. So what does that mean? It means you have 5 phases within a turn to do the things, right? It's like command phase, that's your planning phase essentially. And then it is movement phase, shooting phase, your charge phase, that's where you go into like hand-to-hand combat. And then the fight phase, and then the morale phase. And this whole turn might take 20 or 30 minutes. And so you're doing your play, and your opponent can't respond until it's his turn. And there's very few interactions where he can immediately respond. But there's like ways around it and stuff. But what I didn't understand was like what I do right now can can determine success and failure later on. And so, like I said, when I started researching all this stuff and then integrating with other players, I mean, they're guys like us. They're working professionals, and they find this hobby for one reason or another. They're into sci-fi. They're nerds. They, paint it or whatever. Or one dude I met, he was a JTAC in the army in Afghanistan, and during COVID, his wife was like, "Yo, Dan, like, you need a hobby." And he just researched and found Warhammer 40K. I met him in Las Vegas last year, and dude, he lives like an hour and a half from me, right? So, awesome dude, awesome time. But when I was researching this stuff, I was like, dude, no one's written a book about like what is going on in this game. The core rules tell you what to do, but nothing is really telling you how or why. And so, Derek started his channel, and at one point he was like, dude, like, I want to like take this to the next level, and like I want you to do it with me. And in and around this time, and I have to admit, like, I was going through a lot. I was going through the divorce. I was really like quitting drinking, drinking heavily. And I was like not fully invested. But within the last year, kind of like I said, I went to therapy. I started jujitsu 3 years ago. I really had to learn how to be on my own, and like I did to those guys on that deployment, like I broke myself down to rebuild. So a big part of that was, jujitsu. It was 40K in this like new environment, these new guys I'm interacting with, and faith as well. Really helped me figure out, where am I and what am I doing? Um, and I was like, dude, we're going to write a book. And so I finished the book. I actually finished the final draft, last night. And, yeah, we're looking to, publish it, in around July. And, one of the chapters is, it's not necessarily called like delayed consequence, but a big theme is understanding, the difference between immediate, response versus delayed response. And I think understanding delayed responses helps you understand, what am I doing right now, like for the future, right? I think the easiest way to articulate that would be like investing in the stock market, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's what am I doing right now with my money to have a long-term
Right.
goal in the future. So the idea, in terms of like how to structure the book, came from a couple different sources. One of them was, the book's called The Inner Game of Tennis. And if you get heavy into competitive pistol shooting, the inner game of tennis is one of the top 5 books you read, right? You read Brian Enos, Beyond Fundamentals, Practical Shooting. You read With the Winning in Mind by Lanny Bassam. You read Inner Game of Tennis is in and around there. I would say The Talent Code is another one. But the inner game of tennis, right? Like, how does a tennis book have anything to do with shooting? And it's described as the greatest shooting book, not about shooting. So I wanted to write a 40K book, not about 40K. It's about all of the other ancillary things that 40K like can bring a person in terms of how they think about life, how they make decisions under pressure. And I just started noticing all these similarities between what I did in the Marine Corps to competitive pistol shooting to jujitsu and then to Warhammer 40K.
Yeah. So it's sort of practical events tied to the book. You sort of draw that line between Warhammer and real life is sort of what you've done. Is there a lot of Mike Keevils when you show up at these events?
Some, yeah.
Really?
Um, yeah. When it was my fifth tournament was the Las Vegas Grand Tournament. And dude, again, I don't know anyone. This is before I met Derek. And I hear about Las Vegas Open Grand Tournament, and I was like, "Fuck it, I'm going to that." And so I buy a ticket, dude. There were over 900 players from across the world, and I don't know anyone, and I'm just sitting at the bar, and this dude sits next to me, and like he has the look, so we kind of just look at each other. I'm like, "What's up, man?" And then he's like, "Hey, did you serve?" I was like, "Yeah, I was in still in the Marine Corps Reserve." He's like, "Dude, I'm in the Army National Guard." And we're like, "Oh," he was an SF guy, and he just came back from the deployment, and had a similar kind of getting into the hobby, and then dude, I still talk to him. I saw him when I went to Vegas last last year, and then I'll go again this year. Um, and then yeah, my second year, I get paired up round one with the best player in the world in my division. And I see his name pop up because now like year two, I'm like fully I understand what's going on, and I see his name pop up, and I'm like, oh shit. And
Hmm.
dude, we meet, and I had a KIA bracelet for Danny at the time. It broke. It's on my bookshelf now, but he's like, "Hey, did you serve?" I was like, "Yeah, I was a Marine." And he's like, "Oh, I was in the Army." I was like, "Oh, what'd you do?" And he goes, "I was a Ranger. I actually went to RIP with Pat Tillman." And I was just like, "What?" So we like, connected, in that way. But yeah, dude, like you'll see everything across the spectrum of America.
Yeah.
But I always kind of laugh inside when I'm kind of walking around these major tournaments, hundreds and hundreds of players. And yeah, of course you're gonna have like the stereotypical like nerd or whatever. And then you'll see a kid walking around in like a 275 Ranger Bat hoodie, right? Like I've played everything from dudes that were they work in oncology, right? They're helping cure cancer and shit, to bankers, to salesmen. I met this other dude. He had a JSOC hat on, and throughout the game, like each round is 3 hours, so you're spending like a big portion of your day with this person. And I was like, "Yeah, what'd you do in the Army?" He's like, "Oh, I was a surgeon for JSOC." And I was just like, "Tell me about that." And
Oh,
he was
wow.
just, dude, awesome, man. So yeah, like you will come across anything and everything, and it's opened me up to these relationships and interactions with people that are just completely outside of what I surrounded myself with before. So
Yeah. Bottom line, it sounds like you being introduced to Warhammer was sort of a sense of therapeutic and at the same time identity driven.
yeah.
Would you agree?
Oh yeah, 100%. Because like I we've known each other for a long time. Like in a group, I'm usually like the loud one. Um, and I was in an aggressive unit. I had an aggressive job, and then I go play this game, and dude, I'm like a noob. I'm just getting like crushed, and I was definitely like a guppy in this like sea of sharks, and going back to like not being ego driven and being okay with, yeah, like, dude, I'm totally cool with not being the alpha right now. And I'm just like keeping my mouth shut, and I'm just like observing and listening and trying to learn like what this game is actually asking you to do. Um, and so I was watching this channel, and they said, pick your army based off of your play style, and your play style comes from your personality. And I'm listening to this and I'm like, okay, I get what you're saying, but like that is just not happening for me. I'm a, you know, generally described as a super hyper aggressive person. Um, and I still don't play super aggressively. I've had to learn I've had to learn how to turn up the tempo in the game. But that wasn't like a natural thing for me. I wasn't drawn to the armies that are considered like hyper aggressive. I definitely liked like more of like a combined arms like style of play, where it's like we shoot a thing and then we go finish it off with infantry. Kind of like what we did in the Marine Corps. But there was definitely a point where what I said to myself in the mirror like changed slightly. And dude, for years I'd look in the mirror and just be like, "You're fucking weak, dude." Just really, really negative shit. And it took me some time to be able to look in the mirror and say like, "Hey man, I love you. Let's fucking have a good day." Um, And there was a point in my 40K journey where I did have to look in the mirror and just be like, dude, who are you? And instead of asking the questions of like, where am I, what am I doing? It's who am I and who I want to be. We talked about this in the last episode, like changing like facades. And yes, I am a certain way in certain environments because that's what the environment needs me to be and the organization is asking me to be. Um, but I had to kind of rediscover and learn like I'm just a nerd, dude, and I like cool stories. I like rolling dice. I love painting models. Um, it's it's been amazing for me. And like I said, like faith has been huge. I was definitely a like believed in God in case type of
Yeah.
person.
Yeah. Me too.
And there were several mentors in my life, and no one ever really like pushed it on me. And interestingly enough, these three guys, one of them was Zeb. I talked about him. He was the sniper that taught me how to land nav. There was another guy, Chris, on my second deployment, and then Russ. He's like one of my main mentors. They all said the same thing. They just said, "Hey man, did you ever read the Bible?" And I'd be like, "No, not really." And then dude, after Afghanistan, I got baptized um at 32. I was just like, dude, cuz I used to be not used to be. I still am like heavy like statistics, like, probability driven, but there were just things that happened where it's like that is impossible. Like statistically impossible. There are too many things that happen just to say like, yeah, it was just, life's a box of chocolates. Like, no, that's not how it works.
I
And
agree.
so early on, I bought a Bible and I just started to read, because again, like no one really told me how to do the things. So I'm just gonna figure it out on my own. And on that last deployment, oddly enough, we had a bunch of homeschool kids, and they were, really, heavy Christians, and so I would jump in their men's groups. And so again, like I said, like finding people, 10 years older than you, 10 years younger than you, you're going to learn something. And these guys, they're kind of introducing me to that culture and faith. And so I just started reading, and then I kind of didn't read as much as I should. And about a year ago, I was in North Carolina doing this training event, and a guy mentioned this book called Undying Mercenaries. And if you're a veteran, if you're law enforcement, whatever, like, you will love this book series. And every book is a different deployment. And of course, it's in the future, about 100 years or so, and humanity's like out in space, like fighting aliens and shit. But like the characters are so good. And dude, I went through 23 books in like 3 months. Like, if I wasn't actively talking to a person in reality, I'm listening to this book series. And when I got to the end of it, I was like, you know what, man? Like, if I can dedicate the time to listen to 23 books in a couple months, like, I should probably like work on my faith. So I open up Audible and I go to buy the Bible on audio, and I already had it. And I was just like, all right, like, I'm in. I'm all in. And so I just started listening to different chapters, and like, dude, like, I had no clear path. And then I just started to notice like these things are just kind of all connecting. Um, and anyway, so I bring all that up to where I was doing a thing for 40 days last month, and it was very boring. I had to learn how to be patient, which I always love the definition of patience. It's how we behave while we're waiting. Um, and one of the guys comes up to me. He's like, "Yo, what are you jamming out to?" And I just pull out my phone because I knew he wouldn't believe me. I pull out my phone. And I was listening to Deuteronomy, and he's just like, "That is the last thing I ever thought you would be listening to," which is just another funny situation of like, because he was one of my students. And so of course, like, he saw like that version of me in that training environment. So
Yeah. That's that's funny, man. But you know what? You're right. In combat, things happen, and like mathematically, things could have easily gone the other way, and just by sheer faith, things bounced in like my direction, your direction, whatever, and you're still here. Like I had several episodes of that happen to me when I was downrange where I there was one time where I was arguing with another lieutenant on who's going to go through the city first. And it was literally a flip of a coin. And, you know, as the other Iraqi army unit was going through that city, because I wanted to go through first, but the other lieutenant won the argument. As that Iraqi army convoy went through the city and we stood there and we watched them get completely annihilated with daisy chained IEDs and small
mm,
arms fire. And for me, like, I stood up there on the hill and I looked down and I thought, holy shit, like, if I had won that argument, we would be there. Like, and it was just by circumstance that that didn't happen. And I had a couple other events too, man, where like I've always believed in God and always been religious, but I should probably take the next step like you did and actually read the Bible and better understand, what the Bible means and what it's about. Because I have always throughout my life believed in that. You talked
you know,
about.
I hold on a second. I had an interesting conversation the other day, and I was
uh,
just explaining, uh, just where I'm at with faith.
mm,
And the person I was talking to said, I believe in God, but I just think like religion as a whole is just like a simplistic, like, easy button way to explain the world and explain situations. And I was just like, dude, having faith And th- it's been the hardest thing I've ever I've ever done, hands down. Um, to like we were talking about this a little bit in the pre-show where there were times where I'm putting people through training and they're super nervous or whatever, and I'd be like, dude, I'm with you, man. I'm super nervous too. And they're just like, what are you talking about? Like, you're not nervous about anything. I'm like, that is not true. I think if I had one superpower, my superpower is compartmentalization. I am really good at not kind of, but I'm, good at taking the bad shit that's happening in front of me, and if it's not relevant to the situation, I can put that away, and I can, hyper focus on the task at hand. Um, my wife at the time when I was in Afghanistan, she had cervical cancer, and there wasn't the first thought in my head wasn't I need to go home right now. The first thought in my head was like I need to be wired tight to make sure that like I get home, and I need to take this job and take what I'm doing to the umpteenth level of seriousness, because my biggest fear when I was over there wasn't dying. My greatest fear over there was shooting the wrong person or blue on blue, God forbid. And blue on blue is a part of ground combat operations. I mean, it just is. People like to, you know, pretend like it's not a thing. It's 100% a thing. And for me, that was my biggest fear. Um, so I made sure, like, if I pulled the trigger, like it was, yep, this is black and white. Rules of engagement are good. Like, this needs to happen right now. And if it didn't meet that criteria, then I'm not pulling the trigger. Because there were a lot of times where, yeah, I could have, shot in a direction or whatever. But I could, there were several times, and to put in perspective, right? I wasn't in the mountains. I was in for most of that deployment in 15-foot cornfields. To this day, I see a cornfield and I'm better about it nowadays, but I'll feel uneasy about just seeing this cornfield. Cause I mean, you're up on a position and you're trying to like observe your sector. You can't see overhead movement. You can't see if someone's moving through the corn. It was so thick. It was tall. Um, th- they would throw grenades over our walls. Like how does that happen? How did they sneak up to our walls and throw grenades over? Um, there's this one time we were ripping out the unit that was going to take over our area. RIP stands for relief in place, and you do this thing called left seat, right seat, where their leadership goes out on patrol with you, and then at some point your leadership goes out on patrol with them, like for turnover. And the unit that was taking over for us was called 1-6 1st Battalion, 6 Marines. And so we had their leadership. That mission, actually, when we inserted, we get off the CH-53 helicopters and we walked through weed fields for all night. I mean, like 10 feet of marijuana, and our Afghan army counterparts are like shoving buds in their pockets. You can have up to 25 pounds of marijuana over there. And anyway, so we hit this city, and we're doing our normal things. Anyway, I go out and patrol, and uh, the corn was, I mean, right up to the walls. But we take over this position, and there was like an open spot in front of the front door. So one of my buddies, Nick, he's on security outside on one side, and then other dudes on the other side, and then we're all inside the compound. And during these like daytime kind of routine like presence patrols, one of the jobs was to map the human terrain, right? So that was one of my ancillary jobs where I was the tactical debriefer, and I'd have to interact with the locals, get their biometrics and all that shit. And anyway, I'm in the back of this compound, and earlier I'd closed this door, and all of a sudden I hear pop, and that's the sound of the Chinese grenades when the pin's pulled. So I hear this pop, and everyone kind of looks up, and then I hear grenade. And from Nick's perspective, the guy outside on security, he's just sitting there doing his job, and he's like, dude, this kid like emerged from the corn, and he just looked at me weird and then walked away. And normally when the kids would come up to you, they'd ask for chocolate or dip or cigarettes or whatever. This kid looked at him and just like walked away. Nick was like, oh, that's a little weird. The next thing he knows, he hears the pop. Dude, grenade hits him in the chest. Boom, hits him in the chest. And so he yelled out grenade. He rolls over into a ditch, like a sewage ditch, and the grenade blows up like on top of him. And so I'm in the back of the compound when I hear this happening, and then I just hear the dudes on the rooftop positions. They just start opening up, and I'm like looking around, and I see a bunch of guys like moving to the front door to go like support the guys outside. And it's one of those things where, like, if you're just not in the right position, like you're just not in the right position. And I'm looking around, and I was like, oh, dude, I remember closing this door. So I run over to the door, and I start calling for support, and like no Marines are coming near me. And I was just like, shit, dude, because I knew Nick was generally in that direction. So if we were taking contact, it was from that direction, right in front of that door. And dude, I see this Afghan army kid. He had just came out of boot camp, and he's running towards the door with a saw, which is a squad automatic weapon. It's a 100-round drum machine gun. And I call him over. I'm like, yo, Datarasha. I'm like, come here. And I was like, me and you? I was like, we're going. And he looks at me. He's just like, whoa. And wah is like, yeah, or okay in Pashto. So I open up the door, and as soon as I come out, I was comfortable going out there because I remembered there was about a 3 or 4 foot kind of wall right in front of the door. And like in the corner, I don't know, it was just randomly there, but I knew that there was cover running out there. So I was fine running out there. But I'm definitely not going to go by myself. Dude, I run out there, and then like, dude, grenade goes off like maybe 20 meters to my left. And when we debriefed this whole thing, that was actually a friendly grenade. One of the guys, like the rule of thumb about grenades is like, if you're in the back of like a fight or whatever, like your ass is not throwing grenades. Like grenades are for the front dude. So he actually threw a grenade, and it landed short. That was the grenade that went off. And then when the grenade landed, I saw like movement, like moving this way, like into the corn. So me and this Afghan army dude, we start engaging, and then dude, he goes to his knees. Did you ever see Tropic Thunder?
Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, I remember looking over. I was like, damn, dude, you don't have a suppressor. Recon it's a little bougie. And he looked like Ben Stiller on his knees when he's just like, duh, 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 duh. And anyway, we both finish our mags, and he finishes his drum, and then we move back in, shut the door. I think a dude called me in, and we get in there, and I see Nick on the ground, and Corpsman Rob is putting a pressure bandage on him, because when the grenade went off after it hit him in the chest, piece of shrapnel hit him in the ass, like fucking Forrest Gump, dude. So I see Rob working on him, and then I see the team leader. He's screaming at the other guy for throwing the grenade. And the crazy thing about Rob was, he was a combat replacement, and I had met him maybe 48 hours before this. So our first corpsman, he like broke his knee on our like first mission. Our second corpsman, he got shot in the ribs, and so he was done. And then not done. He lived. He was all good. Which, by the way, everyone talks shit about wearing the side sappies, but when they got ambushed in this alleyway, the 7.62 round hit him in like the top corner of the side sappy, and it blew shrapnel into his armpit. No one talked shit about wearing side sappies after that. We actually dug the
Mhm.
bullet out and then gave it back to him when we met up with him again back stateside. Um, anyway, so uh, we go back to Leatherneck. And in the last episode, I said, we'd be out for about 70 or so days, and we go back to Camp Leatherneck to rest and refit and then go back out. Well, I meet Rob, and dude, by this point in the deployment, I'm pretty strung out. Like, I'm smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And my platoon commander's like, hey, man, like, we got a combat replacement. You need to go get him ready for mission, because we were going straight on mission from Leatherneck, when normally we would go back to our patrol base and then go out in zone. So, dude, I find this kid. He was 21, and dude, I felt like Barnes from Platoon when like he meets up with Charlie Sheen when he's young, and he's like, yep, you don't need this, you don't need that. And he's like, take all this shit off. He's got like the cigarette hanging out. Like, that was me. And he's like, what base are we going to? I was like, we're not going to a base, dude. We're going straight on fucking mission. So like, get your shit straight. You need chow, ammo, frags, fucking go talk to this guy. He'll get your load out for you. And so boom, 48 hours later, he's putting pressure dressing on Nick, who just got fragged in the ass. That was actually September 11th, 2011, which was ironic because he was an NYPD cop. But yeah, man. I mean, I don't remember how we got on that, but
That's pretty wild, man. We got on that because what was the question that I asked? I think I
oh,
asked about
faith and just things
yes,
that
yes,
happen. Yeah. And
yes,
like,
yes.
dude,
Yeah.
they're just things I used to say, you know, and I don't know if you remember this in the class, but I'd be like, yeah, the universe or God's will, whatever, things happen. I used to say that to kind of like open it up to everyone.
Mhm.
But inside, like, I'm definitely the the universe is God's will, man. Like, not to, jump down that rabbit hole, but
Yeah.
like, yeah, man, there is no doubt
Mm.
in my mind um about my faith. And that has been a major contributing factor to like uh to just grounding me and
Yeah.
being okay with who I am, and accepting myself, for forgiving my father and having grace. And back to the landman thing, if anyone watches season 2, like, they know what I'm talking about, where like, for a long time I struggled, where it's like, why is it the son's job to like fix this situation, like, I'm the son. And it was it was through faith to work all that out. And if that's my job to bridge that relationship and honor my parents, then and honor my mother, then that's my job, man. It's what I got to
M-
do.
Maybe that's something I should watch too, because I have a mom that I haven't spoken to in probably 20 years.
Mm.
And you know, and a lot of times when I'm with my dad, he will just be sitting there in silence, and he'll just look at me and he'll just apologize. And I'll be like, "For what?" He'll be like, "There's things you don't remember."
Yeah.
and that's it, and so maybe I should watch that movie because it'll help me process and help me forget. Because I think of that all the time. I'm the youngest in my family, and I don't talk to any of my half siblings because they're drugs and homelessness and all this other shit. So like, maybe I just need to learn how to forgive. So, but this is why I have these conversations. This is why I have this podcast, because in a way, this is sort of therapeutic for me, to talk about these things. But I just want to ask you like one last question. I want to make a comment too, about you. The thing that I appreciate about you and your professionalism is that and you've seen it. There's a lot of like one um one talented individual, and they will just do that talent. Like, what if they're really good at shooting, they'll just shooting. They'll do nothing with jujitsu. They'll do nothing with tactics really, or maybe very little with it. But the thing about you is you seem to like throw yourself into these arenas, and you're okay like throwing yourself into arena and putting on a white belt and getting your ass kicked. And even though you are like a really great competition pistol shooter, you have combat experience, you're a great tactician, um, and you do these other things great, you're okay with submerging yourself into something you've never done before and being a rookie and then figuring it out. And I think that's made you a very well-rounded professional, and that's what makes you a true leader, in my opinion, man. Because I know too many guys that are just like, "Oh, I'm not doing anything but what I'm good at, and after that, fuck that, I'm not doing it." And I think a lot of ego gets in the way with that sort of thing. And I want to ask you a question, just to kind of bring it back to this. But what's the common thread between combat, competition shooting, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and strategy games like Warhammer 40K?
Ultimately, it comes down to decision making.
Hmm.
And, you brought up a great point where, and s- one of the courses I ran, uh, people could fail. Um,
I
and
was in it.
right. And a lot of times people will have a greater fear of failure versus success. They're more afraid of failing than being successful at the thing that they need to do. And to be successful is to accept that failure is on the table. Um, I'm mentoring these students, and I'm talking to them, and I'm trying to help them work through like the emotional turmoil of the fear of failure. And something that I realized while and this is like time after time, class after class, and I'm coming across generally kind of the same archetype of person. Well, what I realized was like I had been close to failure in just about every school that I'd ever been to, in the military. And that's not something that people talk about often. That, you only talk about the successes. Um, there was a point in time in recon school, Marine Recon school, like I almost got dropped in the Army's recon school. At breacher school, I failed the explosives test. And a lot of these schools, like you fail something, you go through remediation, and you have one chance to pass again. Other schools, if you fail one thing one time, like you can't fail anything else the rest of the time. So I mean, the pressure is like always on to perform. And I, was that wasn't something that I really thought about, where I was just like, dude, I've almost failed so many times. And we were talking about this in the pre-show where I tried out for an organization, and dude, I failed in the first 40 minutes. I'll flat out say it, and it was sit-ups, and I had trained for it. I was ready. And one of my best friends was on the cadre, and he watched me fail. And that was the first time I totally failed something, within, the military-esque community ever. And I walked away from that, and because of the competition shooting and 40K and jujitsu and other things like this, I approached this a little bit differently. I told myself, I'm like, and I was about 3.5, 4 hours away from where I lived, where the location was. And I was like, all right, you can motherfuck yourself for the next 3 hours. I didn't listen to music driving back. I didn't listen to anything. I didn't call anyone. I just drove and I just thought about life. And, of course, I'm saying every negative thing you can imagine that someone says to themselves when they fail something. And then when I got out of the car, when I got home, I was like, all right, like, you're done. Like, now it's time to, continue on and keep doing what you're doing. And in retrospect, like, that was my plan. It was, that was not the path for me to go do that job and to go, live that lifestyle. The lifestyle I needed to live was being home and being present, for my sons. And that was something that I didn't understand that I was not doing. I'd either perseverate about the past. Like I said, it took me about a decade to get over the mortuary affairs stuff, to get over the Afghan stuff, to get over, 40 years to get over the stuff with my father. And, so, I was just living in the past essentially. And then also like planning and constantly thinking about the future. And yeah, of course, there are times in all our lives where it's like, all right, like what's the 3-year, 5-year, like 10-year plan? But there's also a time where you get to where you're like, I can kind of plan out financially until I'm 85, you know? Uh, and that's kind of scary, but I bring that up because it's like you're stuck in the past thinking about, bad things that have happened to you. You haven't fully processed those experiences if you're, thinking about them. And then you're constantly thinking about the future. Dude, where are you right now? And this is something I talked about in the courses I ran. Like, where am I? What am I doing? And I wasn't present. Like I was home with the kids, but I wasn't, um, I wasn't like with them. I remember I was going to college, like we talked about before, going to night school. And I remember this one night, I'm sitting there working on the computer, worked all day, came home, whatever. And my son was watching TV, just sitting there on the couch by himself. And I was looking at my schoolwork and I was looking at him. Dude, I shut the laptop. I walked over and I just like sat next to him. I think he was watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or whatever. Dude, he like snuggled up next to me. And dude, I just had like tears running down my eyes. I but even then I didn't know how to maintain that mindset because I was just so stuck in my past. Uh, so I think like, why do I keep putting myself out there? I do now because, like I said, back to that pre-interaction I had with JJ where I let my ego affect me negatively. Like, of course, you need ego, right? We all have it. We all need it to a certain point,
Mhm.
but it needs to be put in check. And you mentioned this thing. It's a phenomenon called the Dunning-Kruger effect,
Mm.
where someone will be introduced to something new. So it's like, here's the level of competency and this is the time you've been doing it. And it's like, for some reason, and we all have done this at some point, everyone has, like you get introduced to a thing and you think you're a fucking expert. You go to one school, you go to one course, you go to one thing, you think you're fucking the shit. And you will stay in this mentality of like, yeah, dude, I know what I'm doing, until something happens where you're exposed to someone of true mastery. You come across them, just whether it's just by accident or you go into competition, right? And then you realize very, very quickly that like you actually fucking suck at the thing. And it's 40K, jujitsu, competitive pistol shooting. It doesn't matter the subject. Um, and you go into what's called the valley of despair, and two things happen. Um, you either realize that you suck and you need to build yourself and seek knowledge and find mentors and build a plan, and then you go on the slope of enlightenment, or you just go back to your small pond. You never go back to the matches. Oh, that shit'll get you killed. Or you go to your first 40K tournament, you get your ass beat, and you just go back to your local store. You don't branch out. And what I found was like, not to sound super hokey, but like I love the process. I love the journey. Like I said, when I saw JJ shoot, I didn't want to be JJ. I wanted to know what he did to get there. And like his story, his ass needs to go on a podcast. But like, dude, he grew up in the Philippines, and his father was in Joe, who coached him for years. He was in USPSA, and then he let JJ shoot once. And I'm assuming he saw something in him, because he told me later on, but he's like, I told JJ he has to dry fire for a year every day before he can shoot again. And Joe was like, yeah, I didn't think he was going to do it. And he did it. And he became a world champion, and dude, he was like 12, right? Like, like people don't understand, like he's been in this level of shooting for 2 decades by the time he was, 30.
Yeah.
Crazy, 35, whatever. They don't understand like how long he's been on this path to mastery. And I tell you what, he's the humblest dude you will ever meet.
Right.
So why does it happen? I think we are built to have some sort of ego. I think we're just designed that way, but it's up to us to put ourselves in situations where you get a reality check and you realize like, whoa, like I'm not anywhere what I thought I was. So how I approach things nowadays is I'm fully expecting to be, I'm starting in the valley of despair day one, and I'm totally cool with it because I just love the journey, and like I was saying, jujitsu, dude, I was a 3-year fucking white belt. And I just got promoted like last week. But dude, something crazy happened 2 weeks ago where I show up to class, I'm just doing the things, and the professor comes up to me, incredible guy, incredible school, South Jersey, BJJ, phenomenal school, phenomenal community. And he comes up to me, Steve, and he's like, hey, Mike, can you work with one of our new guys? I was like, yeah, of course. He's like, hey, he's giving me the left and right lateral limits. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I got you. And, I give this kid a, good role. I'm kind of not necessarily telling him what to do, but I'm coaching him through it. And I make sure like the lesson of the day is in there, the move of the day, all the things. Anyway, we finish, and he gets in front and he goes, hey, I wasn't going to promote anyone today, but I'm going to promote someone today. Dude, the first thought in my head was, oh, dude, I'm getting promoted today. And then he pulls out a brown belt. And I was like, well, that's not me. And dude, my thoughts in my head from the parking lot to the main road were not good. I was motherfucking everything. And dude, this thought just came into my head, and it was, if you could have that belt right now, would you give up anything else you've ever done or accomplished in life, but someone else gets to pick it out and you don't have that? And I was like, no, fuck no. No way I would give anything I've ever done, any memory, anything. I wouldn't give anything up for something that I want right now. And that kind of really reframed how I think about like needs and wants. And, back to the faith thing, I listened to a Christian Orthodox podcast. I wouldn't say I'm Christian Orthodox, but it's pretty cool. It's been working for me. You essentially listen to the Bible in 365 days. And dude, the podcast that day was talking about, Christ talking about needs and wants. And I was just like, all right, if that's what it means, like to let
Mhm.
go. And so that's how I kind of been reframing in my head. And it's like we almost say it, it's like an intrusive thought of like, oh, I want this, I want that. You'll you'll get it if you get it. And if you don't, then wasn't
Yeah.
in the wasn't in your path, man. Uh
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a great that's a great way to look at it. I mean, and for you to have the emotional intelligence to tell yourself that is huge because most people would just be pissed off and continue to be pissed off versus trying to put things into perspective, like you did. So I think that's great that you shared that because the next time I get pissed off about something, that's what I probably need to tell myself, be grateful for everything else that I have.
Yep.
Um, and I want to go over this real quick, man, because you glossed over it earlier. Talked about therapy. Okay, I'm a victim of therapy too. All right, so I happen to think that therapy is great. Um, I've gone to many different therapists in my entire time, whether I was in Jersey over there or in Chicago. I went to all kinds of therapists, and to find a really great one can be troublesome sometimes. But talk to me about what therapy did
Sorry.
for you, and talk to me about why veterans should consider going that route.
Um it's not easy. Um I understand why from a administrative standpoint they called it post-traumatic stress syndrome, right? And they did that to for medical reasons, right? Um but it's it it's not a syndrome. It's just what happens, you know. A couple books that I read that were kind of along the way really impactful. The first one was Achilles in Vietnam, and essentially they're talking about how the story of the Odyssey is actually a PTSD story, and that was his journey after combat. And another great book, What It's Like to Go to War by Carl Marlantis. Um, and then also The Body Keeps the Score. And The Body Keeps the Score starts with combat trauma. So super relatable, like to us. Well, the second, shortly afterwards, it talks about like childhood sexual trauma. And reading through that made me understand a little bit more that like trauma is trauma, which again was a parallel to a neuroscientist I was I don't want to say working for, consulting with. His name's Dr. Justin Smith. He runs Tactical Neuroscience, so check him out on the gram. But a big thing that he understood was like stress is stress. Uh, the difference is consequences and outcomes. But in terms of like what's going on neurologically and like chemically in our heads, like it's the same. And last year, I was doing a CQB course, And my boss, he has this watch, and my son's godfather has the same watch. Anyway, we finished the training day, and he's like, "All right, my watch is telling me to go kill myself, so we're gonna call it here." And we get back to the barracks that night, and Chris was sleeping next to me. I was like, "Hey, so and so had the same watch as you. Like, what was he talking about that?" He's like, "Oh, it's the Garmin Phoenix 8." And I was like, "What did he mean?" And he starts showing me all the stats that it keeps, and one of it is your stress levels. And I was like, "Well, let me see your stress levels." And I was so impressed with it. It was around my birthday, and I was like, "Yeah, I mean, dude, you get it. Like, we're older. I don't really need birthday presents. I kind of buy and I like have everything I want, um, and need for sure." So I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna overnight this right now. And I get the watch and I start wearing it. Anyway, fast forward, I go to that Las Vegas Grand Tournament that I was telling you about. And so, it's a 2-day tournament. It's 3 rounds per day, hundreds and hundreds of players, but my stress levels are actually higher than when I was in a live fire shoot house at night under nods with explosives, all the things, right? And I was
Wow.
like, "Damn, Justin." I was thinking about him. I was like, "Dude, this watch it's confirming all that shit." And so I bring all that up because one, I think I think it's really easy for veterans that went overseas to think like, oh, like, you know, people are comparing themselves and comparing each other, right? Like, well, you weren't in the shit, you weren't doing this, that, or the other thing. And that's true to a point, right? Like, yes, there's going to be different experiences that a dude in the infantry has on the front line versus a guy running convoys, right? There are going to be certain differences, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, the stress and the threat of dying or getting someone else killed, I mean, that is the same up here. And so when veterans think like, oh, like that, nobody knows what I went through, dude, that is not true. One, there's someone that has been through more than you for sure, but also there's like trauma is trauma. And so I think the first step is to realize that, like, you know, everyone goes through traumatic shit, and understanding that like what goes on here is the same. Again, like I said, the differences, consequences, and outcomes, but neurologically, chemically, it affects us the same. And so I think that's like the first step, realizing like you're not the only one. And that was the thing I used to say to my guys on deployment whenever someone was like, "Oh, I'm cold." I'm like, "Oh, you're the only one who's cold right now? Hey, Meridak's the only dude who's cold right now, guys. Like, dude, shut your mouth." Right? Like everyone's cold. "Oh, you're hungry? I'm fucking hungry too, dude." um, so uh, you know, so it's getting over that. The second part is like these people are here to help you. And I was super hesitant of um going to the VA for PTSD. And then my mentor Russ, he was just like, "You need to do it, dude. Like, we went through some shit. Like, this is, you go for your back and you get, you do all these other things. We're in a helicopter crash. Like, we do all these things to help ourselves physically, but like, what are we doing to help ourselves mentally?" And I was just like, "All right, I'm gonna do it." And dude, I talked to this psychologist at the VA, and she didn't really say much, but like I felt pretty good, just getting it out there into the universe, and just saying it out loud. And anyway, so I ended up going to a therapist for a little bit. I actually called the employee assistance program. Like I went through that whole process. and I met this woman, Cindy, super nice lady. And I was, so when you call them, you can kind of request certain types of people. And I was like, look, I want a woman and I want someone who has no law enforcement or military background. Like I wanted to, whatever. And they ask you like, who do you want? And they give you like options and stuff. So I meet this woman, Cindy, and like I said, we we started with like the the combat trauma and stuff, but what it really turned into was like that thing I was talking about, like the shit with my dad
Mm.
that I had just like buried for the last, at the time, like 38 years. Um, and uh I yeah, I didn't realize like how much I was holding on to like those feelings. And like we talked about earlier, it was through faith that helped me like forgive. And I've heard this multiple times, and it was like forgiveness isn't for them. Forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness also doesn't mean access, right? So
Right.
it's like, learning how to be grounded, right? Like that sounds cool, but like what does that actually mean, man? Uh and to me it's like I'm just I really focus on being present, like being here with you right now. Very focused on what we are doing, and I don't care about tomorrow. Today was a great day, but I'm not thinking about that. And I'm here with you right now. And that it's almost undescribable. Like that's the best way I can articulate it is just I am here with you right now, and I'm not on my phone thinking about whatever. I'm not insta facing or fucking whatever. Like I'm here and we're going to do the things, whatever it is. And I try to apply that every day. And it's not like I wake up and I'm like I'm going to be fucking present today. No, dude, like that is a constant thing throughout the day where I'm just like get this out of my head. And the thing I'll say to myself is just release me. I was listening to a Sean Ryan a couple months ago. He had this Catholic priest on there, and he was talking about the 7 types of demonic possession. And one of the interviewer asked him, he's like, "Well, how do you like get rid of these like kind of demonic entities?" Which I always describe to myself as just, and I would always say this loosely ish, but like I felt like the devil's in my head. Just like these like bad fucking thoughts, dude, about everything, everybody, myself, just bad shit. And he said, just pray to release me from, and just talk about it. So I started doing that. And dude, the best way I can describe it is like I just felt lighter the next day. And so anytime I'm getting impatient, dude, I did it today driving. I was on 95. I almost got into like 2 car accidents. I drove an hour and a half to hang out in a spot, only to be there for an hour for, and then I just drive an hour and a half back. But driving there, uh, dude, it's Jersey driver, get the fuck out of the way, brr. And I was like, stop. I'm like, hey, release me. And, I'll say a prayer and I'll just go through it. And I will just keep saying it until like my mind finally just gets quiet, dude. And that's what I've learned, the last year or so, where like my mind was like never quiet. I could never just sit. Even right now, I can just sit. I'm not thinking about you right now. I'm not thinking about nothing. I can just be quiet in my head. And that's the best way I can describe being grounded and just being present. So
Who are you, who who are you, and what did you do with Mike Keevil? Where is Mike Keevil? This is not Mike Keevil. I tell you that right now. No, actually, I'm really proud of you. I can tell by having this conversation with you. that you have a different energy about yourself, and you are grounded, and um, that's the reason why you're so clear when you're telling your stories, and it's so clear and so structured because you are here with me right now, and you are explaining something that you can see very clearly. So you you're at a different place than I am. You're at a better place than I am. Like, I'm not where you are yet. Um, and I want to be. And so just me having this conversation with you is helping me out because I know I need to read the Bible and I need to watch Landman season 2, um, to try to put away some of my issues. So again, this is why I do this podcast, man. It's for other people to hear great stories and great journeys like yours, and then also too, it's for myself. It's been for me to try to figure things out on my own. And Micah, I wanted to ask you, man, this book, who's it for? Who should read it?
Yeah, so it's called Tabletop Gaming for Life. Um, from the creators of 40K Dirtbags. This is one of our hats. That's a Space Marine. And then we went with like the cop off the MLB logo because Derek played baseball. Um, and so it's really about anyone who's interested in a perspective of just performing under pressure. Um, when I was in early drafts, um, I was thinking about how I wanted to introduce the story. And, you know, like I said, I've read a ton of the Warhammer books, so I'm like pretty familiar with how they write and the stories of the superhuman space marines that are like in combat. And I had a similar kind of experience in Afghanistan that a lot of these writers write about. Um, Not to tangent too far, but when I started playing with my kids, like I said, there's like a narrative version and then the competition version. So narratively, I took a screenshot from it was actually Dubai, and I made a GRG, a grid referencing guide. So basically, the military uses that to easily, um, you know, understand where you are in your immediate like battle space. And so it's like battleship, right? So it'd be like, hey, I'm in compound 2-2 in Quebec 5 Romeo. So you look at Quebec 5 Romeo, compound 2-2. Okay, that's where he's at. And so I wrote out this whole narrative of how my sons are like the main characters and they're space marines. And of course they meet nefarious characters and like the mission goes to shit and they got to figure it out. And then on the GRG, I'd have different numbers on there and they Saturday morning, I'm like, hey man, what's the next mission? They'd pick it on the map. I would set up the board to look like that. And then I would read them the story. So I already had kind of like the Warhammer style writing, kind of in my head. And so to introduce the book, I was like, all right, I'm going to use this experience. And I sent that out in a very early draft to a couple close friends. And the one kid, his name's Casper. He was the data guy at my unit. And if you can imagine his call sign was nerd. If you can, like any movie that has the guy, like the operator, like calls on the phone, they're like, "Hey Casper, like we need you to hack this." Like he's that he's that dude. Incredible. Really proud of that guy. And he was like, "Hey, so like what happened on the rest of that mission?" I was like, I don't know. I wasn't really gonna include like kind of any of that shit in the book. And he's like, no, he's like, dude, he's like, I'm digging all the other stuff, but like that was cool too. And then I went down this rabbit hole of like, did you ever see the movie Memento?
No.
Oh, come on, dude. I went on
Yeah,
a early
absolutely.
2000s spree a couple months ago. So, dude, I watched Boondock Saints,
I love
um,
that one.
Memento. Uh, Now I'm drawing a blank from that time. Anyway, so Memento, the story is told backwards. It's one of those types of movies. Oddly enough, I didn't realize when I would teach classes and say, "Hey, I'm going to Tarantino this a little bit," that like now that I got older, a lot of the 25-year-olds and below, like, never saw Pulp Fiction, like, they don't know who Quentin Tarantino is, so someone finally told me, they're like, "Mike, we have no idea what you're talking about when we say that," and I was like, "Ah, dang." Um, dude, I'm like, "Watch Pulp Fiction. Be cool, bitch," right? Anyway, be cool, honey bunny. Um, I went down this rabbit hole of like, so I told the end of that mission as the intro, and it's when we're extracting from this one particular mission. And dude, it was i- in a weird way, that was the most impactful mission of that whole deployment for all of us, and most of us. And it starts off, I was running point because the point man got sick. Everyone had dysentery. We had to ground medevac them earlier. We're drinking dirty water. It's like, drink this shit water or fucking die. We're out of IVs. Like, it was interestingly enough, my one of my recon school instructors was on that deployment with me. And I remember in school, we were all like on the side of this mountain. We've got the heavy rucks on and everyone's, tired and shit. And he's like, "What's wrong with you guys?" And someone's like, "Dude, like the rucks are heavy." He's like, "Dude, there's Force Recon Marines in Afghanistan right now with IVs in their arms and they're still on mission." And at the time I was like, "Okay, dude. Well, fast forward 4 years. We're in Afghanistan. We're out of IVs. There's guys over there with IVs in their arms, and we're still running mission." And I sat next to him. I was like, "I thought you were full of shit, Lynn." And here we are. Um, so anyway, I'm running point because half my platoon got medevaced for dysentery. And, I'm standing at the door. Team leader's like, "Hey, take us out." And I'm running down this trail, and I hear the helicopters overhead. It's pitch black at night, like there's no illumination. Our, PVS 14s like fucking suck. And all of a sudden I see like this like this bright ass infrared light come down from the helicopter marking the landing zone. And so I hear like, "Shift left," like from behind me. So I just shift left and I start running into the corn. Dude, I tripped on my feet. I had a 240 across my back because like, people don't understand this. Like, when dudes get medevac, like your equipment stays. Like, half the platoon goes down, well, all their shit is now carried by the rest of the guys.
Yeah.
And so, dude, that ruck was the heaviest ruck I've ever carried in my life. And so I'm running, dude. I trip on my feet, and I'm so top heavy because I had the 240 machine gun T-bone across my shoulders. I like somersault forward, boom, I slam into the ground. And like, as soon as I could realize what happened, the two guys behind me, they see what happened. They pick me up by the machine gun, and they're like, we just keep on running. And I'm just like running towards the light. And then, the helos are getting closer, like, the sound's getting, it's, I don't have earplugs in, and I didn't have peltors or anything. And then like I see it, and then finally I can like see it kind of coming through our shitty night vision. And then, anyway, so like I take a knee, like the rotor wash hits me. It's like, and then, I'm first on the bird because I'm point man. And, dude, so that was the beginning of the book. And, so when other guys have read like the final manuscript, some dudes are like, "Oh man, like I liked how you kind of like tied this into there." And I was like, it really wasn't, nothing was really tied into that. If anything, that was a parallel story. If you could be inside my brain, like when you said like, where, who are you and what have you done with Mike Keevil? Um, if you were to be inside my head, like that mission and has been like, here's happening real time, and like this mission is like right here as I have lived life. And when I said earlier, like I was always thinking about that mission and that deployment. And so anyway, um it's not really part of the book. Yes, it's in the book, but it's not really tied to the story. It's just a parallel story within the story. So who's the book for? It's for anyone who wants a different perspective in approaching making decisions under pressure. And I go over ego, um, uh, risk management, emotional intelligence, mission planning, and I wanted to talk about it conceptually. Um, I didn't want to go into like the nitty gritty details because, again, selfishly, part of me is like, hey man, like you need to go figure that part out. I'm gonna give you the framework, and you need to fill in the color of how you can take these concepts and then apply them to your game, but also to life in general. Um, I I was very wary of like I'm not. I was very aware of being like preachy. So I did the best I could to, excuse me, like avoid doing that. So I tell some stories in there, just to kind of explain my framework and why I am the way that I am, and how I came to these conclusions, with certain stories. And I kind of picked that style up, along the way, just reading other books. So
Yeah. Yeah, it really makes a lot of sense as far as like how things parallel within your book, and how they're related. By the way, I want to say happy birthday. I want to round this off by asking you a final question, and it's a question on what message you have for your boys. We talked about your life, your adult life, starting out as a cook, going into mortuary affairs, going into Marine Recon, having all these amazing experiences, and then getting out, finding your identity, um, finding Christ. What would be a message that you'd want your boys to know about life, and how they should program, or what they should, I guess, put as their number one?
I had a feeling you were going to ask me that. So I've been thinking about that throughout our conversation as well.
There's probably so much to say, right? But what's that number one thing that you need them to know?
So one, that I love them and I'm so proud of them. They've taught me more than they'll ever understand. They won't understand until they have sons. Um, each one of them has taught me a lot about myself. They're so observant. Everything you do, everything you don't do, which I think is the bigger one. Um, but I'll break this down for kind of the next big phase two of them are moving into. And that's kind of transitioning from high school years into your 20s. And I would say yes, take risks. Um, a lot of my 20s was just being like, either someone asking me, "Hey, Mike, you want to go do this?" Fuck it, yeah, let's go do that. Or I was just like looking for something, and I'm like, I'm gonna go do whatever. But a lot of the doors that opened up for me were because I was willing to put myself out there, and jump into the unknown. I didn't know what mortuary affairs was gonna have in store for me. I knew I wanted to go to Iraq, but that led me to recon, and that led me ultimately that led to us meeting up because um, you know I wouldn't have worked for the place that we worked for if it wasn't for one of the guys that I met along the way. And when you think in retrospect of like, man, how did I end up here right now? And you kind of dissect and break down like all the decisions that you make. Um, I would say a common factor for me was, yeah, I'm gonna go do that. Um, I think another kind of side part to that is, if someone calls you and it's someone that you trust and someone that you respect, and they're like, "Hey, man, I want you to come do a thing with me," just say yes. You know, I wrote about that in the book when Russ called me about Afghanistan. Dude, it was like literally my phone goes off. I didn't know him super well at the time. It's not common to get a call from the battalion operations chief, master gunnery sergeant. And he calls me and he's like, hey, I got one seat for Afghanistan with 3rd Recon. Are you in or are you out? And I need to know right now. And I was like, I'm in, dude. Didn't know exactly where we were going or what we were doing, but I trusted him. And I bring that point up because the kid Trey I was talking about, he's not a kid, he's fucking in his 30s now, married kids, right? He's a grown-ass man. But I called him to go to a unit that I retired from, 3rd Force Recon. And I was like, I went there kind of not really on sort of on a whim. I was at a living funeral for one of my sister platoon mates, Dom Hall, and dude, incredible man. He got pancreatic cancer at like 32, and then the group messages go out. He's got 6 months to live. So we all go to Wisconsin, and dude, we have a paddle party for him, and we're spending time with him, and because he was dying, and dude, I hadn't seen some of those guys for over 10 years from that deployment, and my platoon commander was there, and we kind of lost touch. And he's like, hey, where are you right now? I'm like, dude, I work for the S3, which if you don't know what that is, it's battalion operations. You're doing a lot of paperwork, a lot of planning shit. And I don't mind doing the planning stuff, but I like to go execute, or at least help observe, execute, mentor the junior team leaders and stuff. And I was like, I'm not in a good place right now. And he's like, why don't you come to 3rd Force? And I was like, I'd only go there if I can be a platoon sergeant again. And he's like, yeah, we can do that. I'm like, are you there? He's like, yeah. I'm like, what do you do there? He's like, I'm the fucking lieutenant colonel. I'm the 05, dude. Whatever the fuck you want, like, we can do that. And I was like, okay, cool. So I transfer over, and I get a platoon, and dude, I was able to retire 21-year gunny platoon sergeant with Force Recon Marines, and dude, I loved it, and I got to finish exactly how and where I wanted to finish in my journey in the Marine Corps. But when I got there and I just saw like the culture of the dudes, I started making calls to my guys. I'm like, hey man, like, you should come. And one of them came like 6 months later, another came like 2 years later, and then I got a phone call from a guy who just checked in 2 months after I retired. And I was talking to Trey the other day, and he's like, man, I wish I came sooner. And I was like, look, man, like, just have that be a lesson learned. Like, when someone you trust and someone you respect calls you and says, I want you to come hang out with me and go do this thing with me, dude, that's all you need. You don't need the details. Like, to have the honor of getting a phone call from someone like that, dude, just go, and everything else will kind of buff. So I would say, as my sons, graduate high school, go into that weird funky phase from 18 to 20, and then in their 20s, dude, say yes, go do things. You don't need a ton of information. Just go, and you'll figure it out.
It's a great message, man. Great message. For folks out there who want to follow you, Mike, what social media platforms are you on?
So we're mainly on YouTube. I just started the Instagram just because you got to be on the gram. So yeah, you can go to our website, 40kdirtbags.com, or follow our channel, 40k dirtbags. And yeah, our podcast, we took a different direction from the other kind of tactics channels, and it's essentially like a pressure cooker for a lot of the topics in the book. And we just talk about life and how that applies to 40k and how 40k applies to life, and just kind of everything in between.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love just how you tied everything together, and you talked about your own journey and your evolution altogether has been absolutely amazing, man. Was there anything that I didn't mention in this podcast that you want to mention before we end it?
No, dude, I appreciate your time. This has been great catching up with you. So I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, man. No, the honor's all mine, man. To be honest, you were pretty instrumental in my growth, training wise, helping build my survivability. Um, I can now stand amongst other trained law enforcement officers and get into CQB and run with them. I just did it last week, and a lot of that is because of the very difficult, challenging training that you had put me through. And so I appreciate you and I highly respect you as well. So thank you for having this powerful conversation with us. I think that we didn't plan on this podcast going on this long, man, but I love the detail that you went into on everything. There's a lot of life lessons to be taken away from this. And here's what I want you to take away from this for those of you listening out there. Not every bad decision hits you immediately. Some of them sit, they build, and they show up later when it's harder to fix. That's when clarity matters. That's when simplicity matters. And that's why decisiveness and controlling the tempo matter, because the fight doesn't start when something goes wrong. It starts in the decisions you're making right now. If you've got value from this episode, make sure you share it with someone who needs to hear it. Make sure you follow Mike on Instagram. And also, I'll slam the links for the Instagram and the YouTube down in the show notes. So if you're listening to this, scroll all the way down to the bottom of the show notes. You can find the links there where you can follow. I think that this sort of thing can help therapy wise, can help some of our combat veterans out there cope with whatever's going on up here in their heads. And I want you to remember that survivability isn't just physical, it's how you think, how you decide, and how you operate under pressure. So, for folks out there, as always, until next time, I want you to stay tuned, stay focused, and stay motivated. Warriors, fall out.